Hi everyone, Eric from Helps YouTube Live today, December 23rd, 2025. Merry Christmas. Good to have you here today. It'll be our last day this week until next Monday, okay? My name's Eric, attorney for 46 years, the founder of Helps. Helps is a national law firm that represents seniors and disabled persons who owe debt they can't afford to pay. And what we do is we answer questions that you have on the chat feature. We also talk about Helps and what we do. Helps stands for Help Eliminate Legal Problems for Seniors. Okay? Our most important message to seniors is this. Your Social Security, your pension, your disability, your VA benefit. Those monies are protected under federal and state laws. They can't be taken from you. They're available for your food and your medicine. Okay? And you don't need to use it to pay debt you can't afford to pay, okay? And if you do have any questions, you can always call us at the number down below, 855-435-7787, 855-HELPS-US or HELPS-US. And you can also listen to our YouTube videos. And if you have any questions, we want you to ask them in the chat feature. I'll try to address them. Should be able to do that, okay? A lot of things you're going to hear today you may not hear in other places. And so hope we all learn something. Person contacts us from California and he says, I'm 80 years old and over my head with credit card debt. I receive both Social Security and military retirement pension. How do I use federal laws to eliminate my credit card debt? Okay. So before I started Helps in 2012, I probably filed between 30 and 40,000 bankruptcies, okay? A lot of seniors would come into me who were receiving Social Security or retirement income, and I'd tell them, I'd explain to them, you probably don't necessarily need to file bankruptcy because all your income is protected. No one can touch your Social Security or your pension or your VA benefit. No one can take it. It's available for you. But I knew if I sent them home, creditors could harass them. A lot of them couldn't afford to file bankruptcy. Those are the ones I told not to worry, but the creditors could still call them on the phone and make their lives miserable. So what Helps does is we take advantage of a law that was passed in 1978, the year I graduated from law school, that provides that if you're represented by an attorney, debt collectors can no longer call or send demand letters anymore. They have to leave you alone. And so what happens is when people find out about Helps, they call us on the phone. We go over their situation with them. We ask questions, and they may call several times. We want them to feel comfortable and have that they're dealing with someone who can really help them, which we can. And then when they enroll in Helps, they give us the creditors to whom they owe money. And then we send out a cease and desist letter. All we need is the name, address, and account number. We don't need the balance. I talked to a guy today. He really only had one debt he was worried about, but he was frantic about it. And that was a debt for a solar panel, okay? Now, I might as well talk about that right now for a second. He's from Arizona, and he felt he was scammed into buying this solar panel. He wasn't represented the way he was, the way that he was led to believe. But they had a reverse mortgage on the home, and they were in their latter 80s, and the reverse mortgage, the value on the home had gone down since they got the reverse mortgage. So they really didn't have much of an equity in the home. So they could stay there forever. His wife isn't expected to live that much longer. And I explained to him, I said, well, you've got a reverse mortgage. You're going to stay there till the day you die. He said, that's right. I said, well, it doesn't matter if this solar panel company were to sue you and get a judgment. They can't take your home. They only have a lien on the solar panels. They're not going to repossess them because they're not worth anything. They might have what's called a UCC lien, but it's probably expired. You don't have anything to worry about. And then the company that installed the solar panels had filed bankruptcy, but it's still the creditor you owe money to, and you didn't need to worry about it. And he wanted us to represent him because he was just getting notices from the collector for the solar panel just put him over the top. and I told him, you don't need to worry anymore. And at the end of the conversation, I told him, I said, you can call whenever you want when you're worried or scared. He said, Eric, I'm not going to worry anymore. And that's great, okay? Because we don't want you to worry. When you enroll in HELPS, that's why I started HELPS. Because I didn't want seniors to worry. And if they did worry, I wanted them to have a place that they could call, that we could talk to them and explain to them why they'd be okay. But this guy said he'd be okay. But I don't care if he calls. He can call. And even if you're not a client, we want you to call as often as you need to get answers to your questions. Okay? So this gentleman from California who gets pension, Social Security and military pension, how do I use federal laws to eliminate my credit card debt? Well, only way to eliminate it is in a bankruptcy, but you don't need to eliminate it. Okay? If you're on Social Security or a pension or disability, your income is protected. You're what's called judgment proof. Even if someone were to sue you and get a judgment, they can't take your Social Security or your pensions. Okay? It's protected. And that's what HELPS does. When people enroll in HELPS, you give us the creditors you owe money to, we're going to send a cease and desist letter out to the creditors. We ask you to either, we need the name, address, and account number. We don't need the balance. And we ask you to either send it by mail, to fax it, text it, email it, whatever is easier. In the case with the old gentleman I talked to a few minutes ago, earlier today, he only had this one creditor. I just took it over the phone and sent it to our department that sends out the letters. And our goal is within 24 to 48 hours to send out the cease and desist letters that we get. And we're pretty good about that. And we send you a copy. So that's what we do. We don't want you to worry. Excuse me. So this person contacts us from Maine. And I'll read you what he says. I'm 78 and my wife is 73. We have around 17,000 in credit card debt from 6 different cards. We both draw Social Security. He says he gets $1,900 and his wife gets around $1,200. His wife works and has worked there, has been working for 31 years. Okay. But the last year, her income has gone down because of some medical issues. She isn't working full time, and she hasn't worked much at all in the last 6 months. They don't have any other income other than their retirement income and the work that she does, which now she's not working because of medical issues. They don't own a home, and they've rented the same apartment, he says, for over 20 years. Our only real asset is an older car, 12-year-old car. No one's going to touch the car. It's okay. We don't have any charge-offs yet, but we did get a letter from Citibank for a Home Depot card that is around $700. Right now, we have less than $100 in the bank with no more until January 21st. Social Security checks. And we're unsure if my wife can return to work. I've said all that because in the next few months, I'm sure I will encounter lots of collectors trying to get money that we don't have. And I will need help to handle that. I don't know what help to ask for because I don't know what you can offer. Thank you for any help you can give. So the name of our law firm is HELPS. HELPS stands for Help Eliminate Legal Problems for Seniors. We're going to call this gentleman back from Maine. We're going to explain to him that his Social Security is protected. And together with his wife, he takes home about $3,100. Now, almost twice that money in his bank account is protected. If someone were to sue him, protected automatically from garnishment, about $6,000. he doesn't need to, he can stop paying the credit card debt, the $17,000 in credit card debt. He's probably paying, I'm guessing, $400 to $500 on that debt each month at least. You can stop paying it. You can stop paying it. And if he decides to enroll in HELPS, he's going to give us the creditors he owes money to. We're going to need the name, address, and account number. We're going to send a cease and desist letter, and they're going to leave him alone. And between the time that we send that letter and when he enrolls, in the time that they get the letter and process it and stop contacting him, if they were to call him on the phone and he talked to them, he would tell them he's represented by HELPS. He would give them our number and tell them he's represented by an attorney, give him our name and number, and then he'd hang up the phone. Doesn't need to worry about it. We don't want him to worry. So that's what we offer. We protect you from collector harassment, number one. Number two, we educate you how to maintain your financial independence. So we're going to explain to him why his car is going to be okay. If he gets sued, he's going to get us a copy of the lawsuit. We're going to send a letter to the attorney who sued him, let him know that his income's protected. He can't pay the debt. We're going to call him on the phone, tell him why he doesn't need to worry, and send him an email, explain why he doesn't need to go to court and why he doesn't need to worry. So that's what we do. We don't represent people in court, but we explain what the law is and why they're going to be fine. Okay? So if you have any questions, don't hesitate to call. Okay? That's what we're here for. But, when people find out about HELPS and they realize that they're protected from these creditors and they can't take their money, is usually a big sign of relief. But like I said, we also help in other areas. If you owe taxes, we'll talk to you about that. If you have a student loan, if you have timeshare, we cover a lot of different areas to be able to help seniors. Okay? Put them in questions in a lot of people have inner chats amongst themselves in our chat feature. If you have a question, don't hesitate to type a question in the chat feature. Some people put capital Q, Q, Q at the first so I can spot it easier. And I don't mind people chatting amongst themselves, that's fine. But if you do have a question, I want to be able to answer it. And there's no question that isn't a good question. And you don't need to think, oh, gee, Eric's already probably answered this question. I answer questions that I've talked about over and over again. Everyone knows that, and they expect that. But a lot of people tell me that they like to hear the answer again. So don't hesitate to ask those questions, okay? So this person contacts us from Arizona, and he says, my only income is Social Security. I have a bunch of old debt. Some original and some moved to secondary collection agencies. Well, that's fine. So when you enroll in HELPS, okay, we're going to tell them, hey, your only income is Social Security. It's protected. It's protected in your bank account, as we explained. You don't need to pay this old debt. And you're going to give us the creditors you owe money to, even if it's the original creditor, okay? Now, the Fair Debt Collection Practices Act, that's the law that we operate under, that applies to debt collectors, okay, collection agencies. But in 7 states, the Fair Debt Collection Act has been largely incorporated under state law. And so, but it's our experience that even if we, when we enroll someone in HELPS, we're going to send a letter to whoever you owe money to that you don't want to pay, original creditor or a debt collector. And if it's an original creditor, even if it's a state that doesn't apply the Fair Debt Collection laws to that original creditor, they're going to stop calling you. They may still send you a bill. If you don't want to get the bill, we tell you that you can do a change of address with the creditor and have it sent to HELPS, your name, care of HELPS, and our address. Okay? Yeah, Eric. Jimmy says Eric wouldn't mind if you answer the same question a million times. That is the magic of help. That's why I started help, so that we could always answer your questions. And I've told this story. There was a couple from Oklahoma. God, it had to have been, time flies now. It could have been 10 years ago. That were really, really worried. It was less than 10 years ago. And I happened to talk to them. And of course, I told them they could all, and they did call. They called every single day for at least 60 days in a row, husband and wife. And I talked to them many times, a lot of times during those 60 days, and always told them, answer their question, explain why they didn't worry, told them, one of these days it's going to get through, and you're going to realize that you're going to be okay. And then they stopped calling. But I'll tell you this. I tell people this. One of my pet peeves, if someone calls and they say, I've been really worried and scared, but I know you guys are busy, I didn't want to bother you. No, I never want to hear that. I want you to pick up the phone and call so we can answer your questions. That's why Helps was founded, so we can answer your questions. And if it has to be every day, that's okay. We don't mind. Okay. So this person calls us from, speaking of Oklahoma, they called us from Oklahoma. 76 years old. He gets $7,700 in Social Security, but he gets quite a bit in VA benefits. $4,000, quite a bit. But he's got a lot of debt. He says currently has $50,000 in debt. And the notes, this is probably from one of our paralegals, says, has been working with a debt consolidation company for the last 20 months. It's a year and a half, paying over $1,000 a month. They haven't even paid half of his debt down. I could say this. I'd ask him, when you enrolled with that debt management company and you told them you're getting Social Security and VA benefits, that consolidation company, did they tell you that your income was protected and no one could take it and that you didn't need to pay the debt? And you know what his answer is going to be? They never told me that, Eric. So if you're dined up with debt settlement or debt management and you were never told that your income was protected, join the crowd. These companies, if they would have told you that, you would have realized you didn't need their help and that they couldn't do anything to you. Instead, they don't bother to ask if you're a senior or not. They just sign people up. And they withhold that information, which is critical information, okay, for a senior to know that their income's protected. And there's a lot of websites that deal with seniors that have financial problems. And a lot of their articles will never mention the things that I'm mentioning, the fact that seniors' income is protected. They can send a cease and desist letter and the creditors are ordered to stop calling them. Even the National Council on Aging, on their articles, they get $50 million from the federal government every year. None of their articles mention the fact that a senior's income is protected. They don't need to pay the debt, and instead they're steered toward debt management or debt settlement. Why is that? Because debt settlement companies, GreenPath for one, donate money to them. And so they act in their own financial interest and not in the interests of the seniors they're supposed to help. They're not unusual. There's a lot of these debt settlement or debt management companies. It's an easy business for someone to get into. And then they front load their fees. So if you're like this guy, you pay him for 20 months and all of a sudden you learn, I don't need these guys anymore. They've already collected their fees. Anyway, I get very frustrated with these companies. Let me go on with this guy. Okay. They haven't even paid half down, reviewed cease and desist letters. And we also reviewed how his income is protected, his Social Security and his VA pension. He has a lawsuit and he missed a court hearing. Doesn't matter. They can get a judgment they can't collect from you. confirmed that he has a judgment. He lives on 4.5 acres. He lives in Oklahoma, so Oklahoma has kind of an unlimited homestead exemption. His home isn't at risk. We sent him some emails about what we do, and he said he's going to review those emails and call back, which he did. And it looks like he called back maybe today. He stopped debt. He stopped paying the debt management of the debt consolidation company. And he enrolled in helps. Looks like today. So if you're in that situation, call us and we'll answer your questions. And if you decide you want our help, we'll be glad to help you. We don't turn anyone away. The cost of helps is minimal. Maybe 1 out of 6 or 7 of our clients get our help for free. Those that pay, 1 out of 5 get our help for free. Those that pay, it's just minimal. The most a person would pay would be $40 for 24 months, $20 for 24 months, then free, or $30 for 24 months, $15 for 24 months, then free, or $20 for 24 months, then $10 for 24 months, then free, depending on what your income is. But we make it work for people. We don't want you to worry. Sorry, I got the yawns today. Okay. This guy calls us from Iowa. He says, I'm having a problem paying a timeshare debt. My husband died in March of 2024 from complications of Agent Orange. Also, my mother died in June of 2025. She got an older father that she's taking care of in Louisiana with her siblings. And she's traveling between Iowa and Louisiana every 3 to 4 months by car. When COVID hit in 2019, my husband paid for a timeshare for over 2 years, and we weren't even going to the resort. But they kept harassing him even after he asked them to buy it back or if he could give it back. They told him no to both. I'm only receiving Social Security and a small portion of my husband's VA pension. I will appreciate any help you can assist me. You don't have to pay the timeshare. If you've got a timeshare, in almost every case, it's a pretty lousy investment. And people I talk don't use them anymore. Or if they use them, they can't afford them. They don't want them. And even if it's paid, they can't afford the yearly maintenance fee for it. You can stop paying it and you can let it go back. I talked to my partner several years ago, and my old law firm is still filing thousands of bankruptcies. And I asked my partners a few years ago, I said, guys, do you remember ever on a timeshare, if we ever had a timeshare, someone come to us for bankruptcy because the timeshare had sued them? And none of them had ever remembered if a timeshare had ever sued anyone. They said, no, they don't sue. No, they don't sue. Sometimes they ask to get the timeshare back. They might send you a letter saying, sign this piece of paper, send us $1,000, and we'll let you have the timeshare. But you could do that, but you don't need to pay them $1,000. You could sign the paper and give it back to them if you want. Otherwise, they're just going to foreclose on it. I saw paperwork yesterday where a timeshare did a kind of a foreclosure proceeding, but they're not going to come after you for the money. And even if they did, they couldn't collect from you because you're on Social Security or pension. So no, this person in Iowa, she doesn't need to worry about the timeshare or any of her other debt, okay? Because she's got her plate full. She's taking care of her dad. Her husband passed away recently, and she doesn't need to pay any of his debt or her debt, and her income is protected. She's going to be okay. How long does one go without answering to a creditor? In my case, $16,000 to Wells Fargo. Well, I mean, if you're not communicating with you, do you have to answer them? The answer is no. No, you don't have to answer them. What are they going to do? I mean, eventually they could sue you, but they can't collect from you if you're on protected income. So no, sometimes you don't have to communicate with the creditor. And if you don't want them bothering you, and if you want our help, you enroll in Helps, and we're going to send a letter out to the creditor you owe money to so that they leave you alone. It's that simple. So this person writes in, he says, I'm here in South Dakota. It's getting almost impossible to pay a Wells Fargo credit card debt. Should I see a bankruptcy lawyer? I still owe on our house. Well, you live in South Dakota, okay. You've probably seen movies or seen pictures of the horses and the stagecoaches and the wagons lined up, and then they drop a flag and everyone's going out to claim their 160 acres. Okay, that happened in the late 1800s. The homestead laws, and every state has homestead laws, but in the Midwest, in the Dakotas, Oklahoma, Nebraska, a lot of the Midwestern states, they have homestead laws that protect all the equity in your home, and you certainly do it there in South Dakota. Which means that even if someone were to sue you and get a judgment, they can't take your home, and it's going to be protected. So if you're getting Social Security, I mean, you could file bankruptcy. You don't need to. Probably can't afford to. Bankruptcy is probably minimum $2,000 nowadays, and probably a lot more than that. I know I filed thousands of bankruptcies before I started Helps, because for the very reason that I knew seniors didn't need to file bankruptcy. They just need a protection from creditors. So no, Freeman, you know, we have an email we can send you, Bankruptcy versus Helps, that talks about bankruptcy. And, you know, on occasion it could be necessary, but very rarely is it necessary for seniors. And your Social Security is going to be okay, as your pension is too, okay, or VA benefit, or 401k, or IRA. Those are all protected monies. And they're not going to take your other assets. Okay? And once again, you can look at our website down below, www.helpsishere.org. Help with an S on the end. Helpsishere.org, and look at more of our videos. Okay? Person contacts us from Florida. He's 65 years old. Oh yeah, he gets $2,400 in Social Security and $2,700 in railroad retirement. I've got the yawns today. I had plenty of sleep. I don't know why. Greetings. I can't pay now. Interest is killing me, and now it's hard to manage, he says. I'm about $20,000 plus in debt. I'm about to close most of my cards and only pay the ones I can. When you call Helps, one of the things we're going to ask you, do you have a credit card with a small balance or nothing is owed that you still want to keep? If the answer is yes, you can keep that credit card. As long as it's not backed by a bank with whom you have another credit card, you're not going to pay. Helps is different than bankruptcy. In bankruptcy, all your credit cards are shut off. Helps, you only include the debt you don't want to pay and keep the credit you want to pay. So he goes on to say, you're calling just to ask some questions. He owes some money to Discover and American Express. And then he calls on December, this was back in the middle of November, then he calls on December 22nd. Social Security and railroad retirement. See, railroad retirement is a federal benefit. It's like Social Security. He rents. He doesn't have a car. He stopped paying on the credit cards already. He's been sued by Amex. We read him what we did, quote him what the fees were, sent him a bunch of emails about helps. Oh, he says his railroad retirement is being garnished from his bank account. Now, I talked to this guy, and I told him to find out. See, the rule is that twice the amount of your federal benefits deposited in a bank account, or actually, the technical rule is anything deposited within 60 days of the date of garnishment is protected, which usually amounts to twice the amount of your Social Security, or in this case, Social Security plus his railroad benefits. One of the attorneys told me this morning that, there may be a few, the way it goes, because you get paid either on the third of the month or the second, third, or fourth Wednesday, your Social Security. And depending on when you got, there is a possibility that a person could look back 60 days from a date of garnishment and there's only one deposit made within the last 60 days. In that case, if there was a garnishment, your bank would only protect that one. I'm worried that everyone's going to worry that they're that amount. But if that, we're talking about automatic protections. So if that were to happen, then you could file a challenge to garnish claim of exemption and have the excess money returned, or the court would order it not be taken. But in the vast majority of cases, twice the amount is protected automatically. But someone took some money from the account to which his Social Security, his railroad retirement went. And so he's going to need to get us information on who took that money. Now, there's an exception for taxes, child support, okay? And sometimes if you owe a debt to another federal agency, they can offset 15% of your Social Security. But they took more than that. So I'm going to be curious on who took that. And the part of the problem could be that the bank could have possibly made a mistake. They could have said, oh, railroad retirement isn't a federal benefit, the department in the bank. That would surprise me, because he says it's Chase Bank. Their department should know what to do it the right way. But if they did make a mistake, then we get involved. We contact the bank and let them know what they did and get it straightened out for people. But your chances of having this kind of problem that we need to get involved in this is pretty remote. Okay. How long will they keep pursuing a debtor? I feel guilty. We always pay it. Well, we have an email that talks about guilt and debt. I understand if you feel guilty if you can't pay the debt. You didn't do that intentionally. Life just put you there in this position. If you could pay it, you would pay it. Okay. Also, the bank has been collecting quite a bit of interest. They're not losing any money. They're able to determine at the beginning of the year what percentage of persons are going to not be able to pay their debt. That's one reason they charge the interest they do, to compensate them for anyone that doesn't pay the debt, and also give them a healthy profit. So you don't need to worry about the bank not getting paid. Now, how long are you going to try to collect? Well, it depends. They could collect. I've had people tell me they got calls from debts that were 20 or 30 years old. That's pretty uncommon. There's a statute of limitations in most states, virtually all states, for like 3, 5, 6 years. It could be longer, but usually 5 to 6 years is a typical one, that tells a creditor when they can sue to collect a debt. And that's usually from the date when the debt was incurred or when a last payment was made. Now, if it's been beyond that, they can't sue. They could still send a letter and ask to be paid. But usually when debts get to be 4 or 5 years old, they kind of go away. That's one reason why our fees are structured so after 4 years there's no fee, because these problems do go away. But we represent you ongoing, so that if there is a question or concern, you can always contact us. Can Wells Fargo credit card mess with my Wells Fargo bank account? Good question. Savings or checking. Do credit card companies ever settle with debtors without a middleman? Well, they settle without a middleman all the time. But let's say you owe money to Wells Fargo and you bank there. Okay? There's a bank rule, there's a federal rule that tells banks that if the only money deposited in your bank account is from Social Security, then they can't do an offset from your bank account to pay a debt you owe the bank, unless you gave them permission to do that. And you didn't do that with Wells Fargo. But if you had a bank account with a credit union, then lo and behold, whether you realize it or not, you gave them permission to take money out of your account. It's on the form you signed when you got the bank account with the credit union. Or Truist Bank, they have the same form. But Wells Fargo doesn't. Now, technically, if you have other money going into your account other than Social Security and you owe Wells Fargo money, they could offset money because you have other funds going into the bank account. Normally, I don't see banks doing that. Theoretically, they could. If you're worried about it, then you could just change to a different bank. Okay? But if it's only Social Security you receive and you like Wells Fargo and they're convenient for you, you don't need to pay the credit card debt and they can't take money out of your bank account, okay, to pay the debt. We're talking about, can they offset even without filing a lawsuit? And the answer is no, they can't, okay? Did I hear that one guy had railroad retirement taken? Should I be worried now since I get railroad retirement? I'm a worry word here. No. We don't know the facts yet. It is possible the bank may have made a mistake and we can correct that. And I don't see that happening. It's pretty typical knowledge that railroad retirement and post office retirement is federal benefits equal to Social Security. Okay? So, next one I've got here, this person from Texas. He's 72 and gets $2,000 a month, is renting where he lives. He says, I'm on Social Security. I'm 72 years old, and I'm on Social Security as my only income. I owe credit cards that I can't pay. Yesterday, I received a lawsuit from one of the companies. I owe money. I need help. I'm struggling with other credit card debt I haven't paid. We'll be able to help him. He doesn't need to worry about the lawsuit. He's not going to need to go to court. His only income is Social Security is protected. If he gets sued, we're going to send a letter to the attorney that sued him, let him know that this guy's income's on Social Security is protected. We're going to explain to him why he doesn't need to go to court. Okay? Person contacts from Florida, 78, and husband and wife, 78 and 77. He gets $1,500 in Social Security plus $1,800 in VA benefits, and she gets, and then he gets another VA benefit for $1,100, and she only gets $600 in Social Security. has an RV he can't afford anymore. He still owes around $80,000 on it. We talked about how he didn't have to keep it. He could voluntarily surrender it or let it go back. He doesn't need to worry. And we explained to him that we're not going to send a letter to the lender for the RV until after it's picked up, and then they sell it. And then they're going to send him a letter saying what's the balance he owes, which is called a deficiency notice. At that point, he gets us that balance, that letter, and we're going to send a cease and desist letter to the lender on the RV at that point. Now, if he's been current on the payment, we're going to tell him he can stop. He doesn't need to call the RV lender himself. He should wait normally until they call you, because if you call them when you're current, the person you get through to isn't going to know what to do. But if you're behind and they call you about a missed payment, that person will know what to do. And then you tell them, hey, I can't afford it anymore. Tell them to come pick it up. How much do you think Wells Fargo would settle for, and how does one go about dealing with someone from... Well, they're all the same. I don't get involved with settling debt. This is the problem you're going to have. If Wells Fargo, if all their customers called up and said, I can't afford it, will you settle with me? Everyone would be calling Wells Fargo to settle the debt. Okay. They're going to say no. Okay. Now, if you're behind a whole lot, or if you turn it over to a debt management company or something like that, then maybe they settle, maybe they don't. But they're under federal regulations. They have to. They can't just settle a debt automatically with someone. I think the chances of you being able to settle that debt yourself with Wells Fargo is probably pretty close to zero. Now, maybe if they sued you and there was a lawsuit pending, they might talk to you. But if your income is Social Security or pension and it's limited and you're struggling as it is, you don't need to pay them anything at all. Okay? But the problem is you just can't call a creditor and say, I can't afford it, will you settle with me? And then usually when they settle with you, it's not a monthly amount. Not like, will you cut my bill in half and let me pay you at $400, $300 a month? No. If they're going to settle with you, they're going to want lump sum cash. They're not going to want a monthly payment. They want lump sum cash. Well, I don't have lump sum cash. Well, it's a waste of time to try to settle. You can. We don't get involved in settlement. But I know how it works. And that's why I'm telling you, they don't. Now, if they sue you and got a judgment, then yeah, they might be happy to take monthly payments. But if you're going to try to settle the balance for a discounted amount, cash is the only way to do that. And even then, it may not be possible if unless they have a judgment, because otherwise everyone would be doing it. Okay. So Jane asks, if my mortgage company denied a loan modification and they gave a payment instead, can I appeal it? Or would they let me still keep my payment? Well, okay. A bank doesn't have to modify. It's totally up to the bank if they're going to modify your mortgage if you're behind, or put the missed payments at the end or something like that. Now, after the mortgage crisis or the financial outfall in 2008, a law went into effect that required the banks to do something about it. But that law has been long old. But some of the banks still have procedures to modify mortgages because they don't want to foreclose if they don't have to. Hope that answered your question. I've heard of debt settled for 1/2. Yeah, at some point a debt might, but you're going to have to come up with the cash. It doesn't mean they're going to do it either. Okay. I'm not really an expert on settling debt because we don't settle debt. It helps our clients. They can't afford to pay the debt. They don't need to settle the debt. We don't need it. We don't get involved with debt settlement. Although we do represent a lot of people that were involved with debt settlement and realized it didn't work for them or they didn't need to do it. So this person contacts us from Arizona. He's 83 and he gets $2,700 in Social Security. And he says, one of my close friends in Oregon has worked with you and helps work with him to handle things wonderfully. And I've gotten into a similar situation, he says. Gives his phone number. He's 83 years old. He still works part-time. And then he says, actually full-time. Oh yeah, I remember this email. And I'm about $30,000 in debt. And then he says, I'm tired. I'm exhausted. That's the title of today's video. It says senior, tired, exhausted, in debt. And this guy is. He says, I'm tired, I'm exhausted. He's 83. He's probably getting full Social Security, and he's working full-time. He says, my mind is still strong, my health is still relatively good, but then I have a job that I can probably do for the next couple of years. But my credit report is stopping. I would appreciate any help or any response, he says. He gives us his number and his email address. So thank you very much for any kind of response you might be able to help me, might be able to give me. And we did talk to him. He says, I'm desperate, age 83, working 40 hours a week. We called him again a couple of days ago, and he connected. And the paralegal says that he seemed a little confused. I have a bunch of old debt, some original and some moved to secondary collection agencies. A friend recommended to you. What do you need from me? So we told him what we did. We told him that he didn't need to pay this old debt. The credit cards were in collections. He enrolled in helps. He can still work if he wants. He works in Arizona. Okay, there's exemption laws that protect wages. It depends on the state. There's a federal law that protects a minimum of $217.50 net per week in wages in every state. That's $435 every 2 weeks, or about $950 a month. But some states, like Texas, for example, don't even permit garnishment of wages. And other states protect a whole lot more than that. California, $600 or $700 a week. Nevada, different states. Okay? But it's our experience that our seniors that enroll with helps, those that work, a lot of them, they're never sued. And if they're sued, they're not garnished. A creditor would have to find out where you work and file writ of garnishment on your employer. And it's not that easy to find out where someone works. Okay? Okay. Let's see here. I've got some questions to deal with. Okay. Will my non-payment Wells Fargo card affect my two other $500 credit cards? It shouldn't. When people call helps, or when one of the questions we ask them, do you have a credit card with a smaller balance or nothing is owed that you still want to keep? And if the answer is yes, we explain that you're going to keep that credit card as long as it's not backed by a bank with whom you have another credit card you're not going to pay. So, yeah, if you have another Wells Fargo credit card and you don't pay the big one, they're going to cut both of them off. But if you have a card with Chase or some other credit card company backed by a bank that's not Wells Fargo, as long as you pay that credit card, you should keep it without a problem. Okay. Person contacts us from Minnesota. Husband and wife, and they both receive Social Security. Wife also gets a pension. Says the only debt is a timeshare. Just received a summons for the timeshare in the husband's name. He plans to contest this in court. Don't need to contest it. If you owe the timeshare, just let him get. I'm assuming that it was it may not have been on the timeshare. It may have been a debt. He says he may need us in the future. Yeah. I mean, you could contest a lawsuit if you want. Most of our clients don't do that. They don't need to because their income is protected. If the creditor gets a judgment, they can't do anything. And the other reason they don't contest it is because they owe the money. There's no defense. Oh, well, it turns out that this person called us back a few days ago and decided to enroll in helps. And we would have told them you don't need to go to court. Okay? Okay. This person contacts us from Iowa. Age 70, they have $1,900 in Social Security and $21,000 in debt. They're current on their debt, it says. Well, they missed a few payments, it says. Medical debt, they have cancer. Medication is extremely expensive. And then they called back in December after they learned more about helps. They feel more comfortable if she could review our emails. And so we sent them some more emails. And they called back 2 days ago, yesterday. It looks like they enrolled. They got answers to their questions and they enrolled. So this person contacts us from Ohio. Said, I had to retire early at age 60 to help a relative who had an injury. And it says, so I and my wife do not have any income. We're getting Medicaid and SNAP benefits, food stamps. He has a home that's free and clear that he paid off. And he owes some property taxes that he's worried about. So in most states, it takes, if you don't pay the property tax, it's going to take a couple of years for them to foreclose on the property to get it back. Depends on the state law. So we're not in a position to even make payment arrangements, and our main concern is keeping our home and avoid foreclosure. We're not going to get foreclosed on by the credit cards, but you could if you don't pay the property taxes. You got a vehicle that's going to be repossessed. He's got a couple credit cards he's been paying on with his family's help. We explained to him what we did. We would represent him so these other creditors wouldn't bother him. I can't help him with the property taxes. He's going to need to pay those eventually. Our main concern is keeping our house and avoiding foreclosure. I do plan to receive Social Security at age 62. He's 60 now, but that's 2 years away. So my other question is, can either of these two debts be garnished at that point from my Social Security? No, your credit card debts can't garnish your Social Security. So this is the quote on Ohio law. In Ohio, the time before a property tax foreclosure can vary, but generally the process may begin after taxes have been delinquent for approximately 1.5 to 3 years, depending on the specific county and method used. They're not going to get your property immediately right away. Okay. Well, okay. It's Tuesday, day before Christmas Eve. I'm done. It's been an hour. I want to thank you for participating. Please press the like button. Please share what Helps does with others. I really sincerely appreciate all your support and all the nice comments that people make. We always ask our clients to share what Helps does with others. A lot of seniors need this help. I have no idea it's available. So Merry Christmas to you all too. And I will talk to you on Monday. God bless.